Chapter 1771. It was as if they were watching a fantasy blockbuster. Everyone was so shocked that they couldn't speak for a long time. They watched as the majestic castle was razed to the ground in an instant. After a long while, Qin Qingqing asked in a daze, "Sister Lang Shi is still in the castle? She won't have an accident, right?" Everyone looked at each other. Zhang Chao said uncertainly, "It shouldn't be a problem, right? That man looks very powerful." Although he said that, his expression was obviously worried. At this moment, Shui Wan suddenly cried out in surprise. Everyone followed her gaze and saw an extremely unbelievable scene again. A tall building rose from the ground. They had all heard of these words before, but this was the first time they had truly felt these words. They saw that in the ruins where the ghost castle used to be, there seemed to be an invisible hand controlling it. Countless rubble and bricks automatically combined and rose bit by bit. A new castle slowly took shape in front of their eyes. If the scene of the ghost castle collapsing just now was like watching a fantasy blockbuster, then the scene of a castle appearing out of thin air at this moment was simply like a miracle. All of this was too inconceivable. Qin Qingqing said in a daze, "That man, is he a god? Otherwise, how could he have such a shocking ability?" No one could answer her question. Back to the castle. After Qin Qingqing and the others left the castle, the man held Gu Xingyi's hand. "My bride, you don't seem to know me well enough." The man bent down and gently leaned his forehead against Gu Xingyi's forehead. In an instant, countless memories appeared in Gu Xingyi's mind. It was about the life of another person, a man named Nicholas Brent Filton. He was born in a famous noble family. He was supposed to be the eldest son of the family and the future heir. However, because his birth mother was unknown, his position had always been quite awkward. Later, his father, the promiscuous Duke of Violet, married the princess of the empire and even left an heir with an even more noble status. His position as the eldest son was even more awkward. Moreover, as he grew older, there were many different aspects of his body that were different from ordinary people. His appearance was extraordinarily handsome. He could see things at night, talk to animals, and even use the legendary magic. Under the manipulation of his noble stepmother, he was labeled as a heretic by the church at that time. The so-called heretics were different from ordinary people and should be burned to death. He was drugged by his father, tied up, and burned at the stake. When he saw the fire burning around him and felt the scorching heat, Nicholas' heart sank. He didn't feel that death was scary. The only thing that chilled his heart was the way his biological father looked at him. His eyes were filled with fear and disgust instead of looking at his own son. Then, everyone saw a miraculous scene. This person who was called a heretic was not afraid of fire at all. Those flames licked his body, but they didn't even ignite the corner of his clothes. It was also at that time that Nicholas met his mother for the first time. A woman so beautiful that she made people forget to breathe. Chapter 1772. That woman had a perfect and delicate face. She wore a gorgeous robe carved out of ice and snow, and wore a noble crown on her head. The moment her real body descended into the fire, the temperature of the entire place dropped. The flames seemed to have met their natural enemy, and they trembled and extinguished. On that day, Nicholas finally knew that he was not some lowly bastard, but the child of God. The snow goddess, who was traveling the continent in the incarnation of the snow goddess, fell in love with the Violet Duke at first sight, and developed a romantic relationship with him. And Nicholas was the result of this relationship. Not long after the snow goddess gave birth to Nicholas, she returned to the divine realm, and the Violet Duke, who was a playboy by nature, quickly forgot his beautiful lover. Although she did not have many feelings for Nicholas, the snow goddess was still angry about what happened to him, which was rare. In the eyes of God, the way the people of this country treated her child was an indirect blasphemy. She took Nicholas away on the spot and personally gave him God's punishment. The whole country was ravaged by snow and ice for an entire year. Food could not be grown, and countless people froze to death or starved to death. The rule of the whole country began to be in danger. No one dared to blame God, so they all vented their anger on the family that mistreated Nicholas. The Duke and the Princess lived in fear every day, deeply afraid that they would be retaliated against by the rioting people if they went out one day. But in the end, they still did not escape. The Holy See, which had once condemned Nicholas as a heretic, reached an agreement with the royal family. They personally tied up the Violet Duke and the princess, and made them kneel in front of the altar. They also said that they were willing to pay any price, just for the great snow goddess to appease her anger. In the end, the Violet Duke, his princess wife, and the child who was born with a noble status were forever exiled from the country. And Nicholas became the new Violet Duke. Because of his bloodline, Nicholas was almost immortal. He had experienced countless dynasties, and he had seen countless emperors ascend the throne and die. He even controlled the change of royal power in this huge dynasty. He became the most powerful man in this dynasty, and no one had any objections. Until he finally grew tired of this world. Thus, he sealed himself and his castle and fell into a deep slumber. Gu Xingyi's heart skipped a beat when she finished reading these memories. This man seemed to be of noble status, but he must have lived a very lonely life, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't have sealed himself into a deep slumber. A pair of hands reached out and covered her eyes. I told you not to look at me like that. I won't be able to control myself. A low and hoarse voice sounded in her ears. Besides, I'm not as pitiful as you think. I sealed myself because I felt that the world was too boring and I desperately wanted to see my bride. Gu Xingyi reached out to grab his hand and pulled it down. She looked at him in surprise. By the way, you haven't told me why you call me your bride. And how do you know that I'm your bride? Chapter 1773. Nicholas looked at her and said with a smile, "Let me put it this way. Among all my mother's children, I am the one who has inherited her divine bloodline the most perfectly. So, I can probably have power that is almost comparable to that of a god." Gu Xingyi blinked. So, Nicholas hugged her and sat down on the seat covered with thick feathers. During that period of time when I was quite bored, I slowly began to explore some new fields, such as time. Gu Xingyi looked up at him in surprise. She had once become a god, so she naturally knew that the law of time was not something that could be easily controlled by gods. Generally speaking, except for those gods who were born with the priesthood of time, few other gods would devote themselves to studying this. As for Nicholas, he was a demigod. Why would he research this? Nicholas thought she was curious about this. He said, "I slowly came into contact with the law of time. At first, I caused a lot of trouble, but later, I slowly became very familiar with it. It was also at that time that I saw you." Gu Xingyi was shocked. She looked at Nicholas, who also lowered his head and looked at her. "Because of the bloodline in my body, I also have some understanding of some things that are completely different from human beings. For example, the first time I saw you, I knew that you were my future bride. At first, I was just curious. I wanted to know what kind of woman I would be with in the future, and what about you could attract me." Nicholas's lips curled into a charming smile, and he looked a little helpless. "Who knew that I would fall in just like that? I actually fell in love with my future bride more than 1,000 years in advance." Nicholas couldn't help but lower his head and gently rub Gu Xingyi's forehead. He sighed with satisfaction. "You don't know how maddening it is to fall in love with someone but not be able to find her. At that time, when I thought that I would not be able to see you for another 1,000 years, I felt anxious and desperate. At that time, I even thought of traveling through time, but my mother found out about it and stopped me personally. She said that if I rashly traveled through time, perhaps nothing would happen to me, but many things would change because of my actions. Even you might disappear from the future because of my careless actions." Nicholas said helplessly, "I didn't dare to take such a big risk, but I also felt that time was too long, so I simply set up a formation and sealed myself." Gu Xingyi was speechless for a long time after hearing her words. She had never thought that there would be someone in this world who had waited for her for so long. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but she couldn't say a word for a long time. In the end, she could only curse softly, "Idiot." Nicholas smiled and hugged her tightly. "This fool is the fool who loves you the most in this world." Gu Shengyin buried her head in his arms and couldn't help but smile. Oh right. Nicholas seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He sounded a little apologetic. I know about some of the things that happened to you in this castle. It's my negligence. Because the castle ceiling formation contains a huge amount of spiritual power, it can easily attract wandering souls and wild ghosts. Who would have thought that the territory of the Violet Duke would turn into a ghost castle that scares the living daylights out of people? Chapter 1774. Nicholas's tone was a little unpleasant. Fortunately, almost no one in this world knew him. Otherwise, even if those people did not dare to show it on their faces, they would definitely laugh at him for this matter in their hearts. As he thought about it, he suddenly stood up with Gu Shengyin in his arms. I'll take you to watch a good show. The moment he spoke, Gu Shengyin felt the scene in front of her change instantly. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in the sky. That's right, she was in Nicholas's arms, and the two of them were standing in the air. Nicholas looked at her and asked, Aren't you afraid? Gu Shengyin shook her head. No, I think this feeling is very good. Nicholas laughed. As expected of his bride. Normal people would be scared to tears in such a situation, but she was the only one who was so calm. He turned his head and looked at the ominous black fog below. The entire castle was old and decayed, and a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. His place had actually been reduced to such a state by these ghosts. Since you're a soul body, don't stay in the world and harm the living. Disperse, he said with an indifferent expression. Then, from under his feet, a wild snowstorm appeared in the sky. The snowstorm, which had the power to tear the world apart, shrouded the castle. Starting from the inside, whether it was the shivering ghosts or the old castle that had stood for thousands of years, they all dissipated under this power. Gu Shengyin opened her eyes and watched Nicholas turn the castle into ruins in an instant. Where will you live in the future? Nicholas was speechless. From the beginning, he had been waiting for Gu Shengyin to ask him questions. He was prepared to answer any question, but he never expected that she would ask such an unexpected question. He could not help but laugh. I want to marry my bride. Naturally, I can't keep such a shabby castle. Gu Shengyin tilted her head and said deliberately, Then, the great Violet Duke, do you want to give me a bigger and more gorgeous castle? Nicholas looked at her with a smile. So this is what Shesha likes? Before Gu Shengyin could say anything, he nodded. That makes sense. My bride should live in the most gorgeous castle in the world. Thus, there was the scene that everyone saw in front of them. A castle that would take at least years to build if it took manpower was built by Nicholas in an instant. He landed in the newly built castle with her. There was a boundless field of violet flowers, which was the symbol of Nicholas's family emblem. I heard that in your world, the groom should have a house to marry his bride? Nicholas asked. Gu Shengyin, what kind of weird program did you watch? Then, she saw Nicholas take a step back and stand elegantly in front of her. Suddenly, a fiery red flower appeared in his hand. Then, fair Miss Lench, I will give you this castle as a betrothal gift. Will you marry me and become my bride, Nicholas Brent Filton? Gu Shengyin. She could not help but laugh. Nicholas looked at her in confusion. However, Gu Shengyin did not explain. Instead, he smiled and reached out to take the words from his hand. All right, since you've waited for me so sincerely for 1,000 years, I'll reluctantly agree to your request. 10 chapters ended. Gao Langji confirmed that there would not be an update tomorrow morning. Gao Langji had a stomachache and could not continue writing. See you tomorrow during the day. I will continue to update. Babies, vote for Wan Gengji, okay? Good night. Chapter 1775. Gu Shengyin stayed in the castle with Nicholas for a long time. She was different from others. Because she liked to take risks, she didn't have any fixed friends around her. Her family was no longer in this world. Basically, everything was arranged by herself. By the way, are there any other gods in this world now? On this day, Gu Shengyin sat on the swing in the castle garden, feeling the warm sunlight. She turned her head and asked the handsome man standing behind her. A trace of nostalgia flashed in Nicholas's eyes. Of course there are. Gods are almost immortal. Even if they choose to sleep or reincarnate for various reasons, one day, their consciousness will be revived. Nicholas turned his head. His gaze seemed to penetrate countless spaces and see a very distant place. Maybe a businessman who runs a mall or a very famous star is secretly a god who was once worshipped by countless people. Gu Shengyin was thoughtful. Her cell phone suddenly rang. She opened the interface and a message from Shui Wan came from the social media app. Li Chong and I are going to get married next month. Would you like to come to my wedding? Speaking of which, when they came to the castle, mobile phones and other things basically lost their function. It wasn't until Nicholas built a new castle that everything here returned to normal. As for the other 5, they finally got in touch with Gu Shengyin. Perhaps because they had experienced life and death together, the relationship between them had become very good. Zhang Chao created a group and pulled all of them into this small group. Gu Shengyin's fingers moved. So fast. Shui Wan replied with a shy expression. He and I both feel that we are the most suitable people for each other. Gu Shengyin thought for a moment and said, "Okay, I will attend on time." Putting down the phone, Gu Shengyin looked up at Nicholas. Nicholas asked, "What's wrong?" Gu Shengyin said, "I have a friend next month who came here with me before. They are getting married. Do you want to go to the wedding with me?" Nicholas answered without hesitation, "Of course. It's my duty to accompany you to all kinds of banquets." His understanding of certain things was still 1,000 years ago. In the era he lived in, as lovers who had confirmed their relationship, as a man, he naturally had to accompany his female companion to various social events. This was the duty of lovers, and also a way to announce their relationship to everyone. Even though he knew that this was no longer important, Nicholas still couldn't change it easily. However, it didn't seem like there was anything to change. After all, the only person he cared about after waking up was Gu Shengyin. Staying by her side and following her wherever she went was something that he would definitely do. Gu Shengyin had expected his answer. She smiled mischievously. "When the time comes, I'll take you there. It'll definitely cause a sensation." Nicholas was a little confused. Gu Shengyin gently swayed the swing and sighed. "Beauty. You probably don't understand how much people in this world are obsessed with looks." Chapter 1776. Nicholas chuckled softly when he heard this. Gu Shengyin was puzzled. "What are you laughing at?" She recalled what she had just said and didn't think there was anything wrong with it. The next moment, Nicholas' figure appeared beside her. The two sat on the swing together, and the golden sunlight shone on his God-given face. Gu Shengyin looked up at him, and her breath caught slightly. Nicholas said with a smile, "I can actually understand what you mean. In my time, people also pursued beauty. Every time the Violet Duke went out, the carriage was specially made. Because there would be many men and women who admired the Duke's beauty and tried everything to get close to him. According to the customs at that time, this kind of thing was a beautiful thing." Nicholas couldn't be angry because of this, and even punish those who challenged the Duke's dignity. Hearing Nicholas's words, Gu Shengyin almost fell into his arms with laughter. She could imagine what a spectacular scene it would be. Nicholas just gently reached out his hand to support her back, to prevent his lover from falling because of the intense movements. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was the wedding day that Shui Wan had promised. Gu Shengyin and Nicholas came to the address that Shui Wan had told them. Before entering the hotel, the two were baptized by countless gazes. There were even several hot beauties who had the courage to strike up a conversation with Nicholas, completely ignoring the fact that he had a female companion with him. Gu Shengyin helplessly curved her lips and said to Nicholas, "I knew that I would face such treatment when I was with you." Nicholas glanced at the many gazes that were looking in his direction. He could clearly see that most of these gazes were from men. These people were not interested in him. Did his bride not realize that her attractiveness to men was not much weaker than her attractiveness to women? At this time, the groom, Li Chong, noticed this side. When he saw Gu Shengyin, he smiled and hurried over to greet her. Lang Shi, you're here? Everyone is here, except for you. At this moment, he also saw Nicholas standing behind Gu Shengyin. The smile on Li Chong's face froze. Of course he recognized Nicholas. At that time, this man had left a deep impression on them. And this one, Gu Shengyin promptly added, my husband, you can call him Filton. Nicholas continued Gu Shengyin's words and said calmly. He nodded slightly at Li Chong and said in a restrained and reserved tone, Mr. Li Chong, I wish you a happy marriage. Li Chong's entire body stiffened. Facing this man, he found that he would always inadvertently become nervous. Thank you, Mr. Felton. Even when he addressed Nicholas, he could not help but use honorifics. Nicholas's expression was not unnatural at all. He was already used to people treating him with such respect. Li Chong brought the two of them to a place in the hall. Over there, Qin Guo, Zhang Chao and Qin Qingqing were all there. Everyone was surprised to see Nicholas. They did not expect that this man would actually accompany Lang Shi to the wedding. Gu Shengyin looked helplessly at their unnatural and reserved attitudes, but she also understood them. Chapter 1777. Looking at their expressions, Nicholas clearly understood that with him around, they wouldn't be able to let go. He whispered something to Gu Shengyin, and then said to the others, I still have something to do. You guys take your time. After he finished speaking, he nodded at everyone, turned around, and walked out. They waited for him to leave before they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Zhang Chao laughed self-deprecatingly and said, I'm more nervous facing this person than facing my boss. Qin Qingqing also covered her chest with a smile and made an exaggerated expression. That's right. I've never been so honest with our grade director. She was wearing a light green dress today, which made her look playful and cute. As she spoke, she looked at Gu Shengyin with a gossipy expression. Are you and him really together? The others also looked over curiously. There was nothing to hide. Gu Shengyin nodded generously. Qin Guo looked a little worried. After all, he's in that situation. You guys. He wanted to say something but hesitated. Gu Shengyin smiled brightly. It's nothing. Don't worry. We're fine. Her happiness was written all over her face. When everyone saw this, they didn't say anything else. As the groom today, Li Chong was very busy. Everyone only gathered together and said a few words before they drove him away to receive other guests. Qin Qingqing looked at Gu Shengyin with her chin in her hand and suddenly said with emotion, Actually, Sister Lang Shi, it's pretty good for you to be with Mr. Filton. Without waiting for Gu Shengyin's reply, she looked into the distance and said with longing in her eyes, If I could sleep with such a peerless beauty just once, I would die without regrets. Zhang Chao rubbed the goosebumps on his arms. Are young girls nowadays so open? Qin Qingqing rolled her eyes at him. An old man like you won't understand me. The old Zhang Chao man felt hurt. He silently thought about that mysterious and powerful Mr. Filton, who seemed to be the same age as the castle, and silently expressed that he did not want to speak. Gu Shengyin and a few others witnessed the wedding of Li Chong and Shui Wan. After the wedding, she went to meet the bride with Nicholas and gave her the gifts she had prepared. This is a gift that Nicholas and I specially prepared for you. It can bring you luck. Gu Shengyin winked. Shui Wan took it with a smile. After all the guests had left, the couple began to open the gifts slowly. It was Gu Shengyin's turn to bring up the small box. Shui Wan thought of the mysterious man standing beside her and couldn't help but feel curious about their gifts. She slowly opened the delicate little box in her hand. Wow! It's so beautiful! Shui Wan's eyes sparkled. Inside the box were two necklaces that obviously belonged to a couple. There was a thumb-sized snowball on the silver chain. She didn't know what material the snowball was made of. At a glance, It was pure white like snow, but upon closer inspection, it was made of countless transparent and colorless crystals. The other style was not much different, but the chain was much thicker, and the style of the snowball was not so exquisite. Thinking of the mysterious man, Shui Wan said, "Li Chong, shall I put it on for you?" Li Chong also felt that this snowball necklace should be something extraordinary, especially since Lang She said that it could bring luck. It must have its use, so he nodded. Chapter 1778. Ever since Shui Wan and Li Chong put on this snowball necklace, they had never taken it off. They didn't know if this necklace could really bring good luck. Not long after the two of them got married, they both resigned and started a small business with the savings in their hands and some spare money given by the two parents. Originally, the two of them didn't have much hope, but who knew that their journey would be smooth sailing without any hiccups. Their business grew bigger and bigger, and they slowly expanded their small shop, developed branches, and became a chain, until they were successfully listed. The couple firmly believed that this was the credit of the necklace that Lang She had given them back then. Even later, Shui Wan had a lot of money and bought countless pieces of jewelry. However, she always wore that very beautiful snowball necklace on her neck. Others had also asked her curiously, but Shui Wan only smiled mysteriously. "This is something very important to me." In this winter, Gu Shengyin and Nicholas held a wedding. The wedding guests were the 5 people who had been to the castle with Gu Shengyin. To be honest, they still had some shadows about this place. But they still agreed to come together. After arriving here, they quickly forgot to exclaim in amazement. While Zhang Chao was amazed, he carried out his instinct as a reporter and took hundreds of photos in one breath. Qin Qingqing still had a dreamy look on her face. "I will feel like a real princess having a wedding in such a castle." She looked at Gu Shengyin enviously. She was now the mistress of a castle that was even more gorgeous than a foreign palace. Here, she was more than a princess. She was simply an empress. The wedding between the two of them was simple and solemn. The only audience was only 5 people. Everything was quiet and sacred. Only the moment the two of them exchanged rings, everyone's eyes suddenly blurred. The air suddenly became cool and thin. A woman wearing a gorgeous ice blue robe and a crown of ice and snow on her head appeared in the hall. She held a scepter in her hand, and at the top of the scepter was an exquisite 6-colored snowflake. She had long silver white hair that fell to the ground, long and curly silver eyelashes, and even her eyes were clean and cold silver white. This person was like the noble and powerful ice goddess from the legends. The few of them were shocked. Qin Qingqing covered her mouth to prevent herself from screaming. Nicholas seemed a little surprised by her appearance. He held Gu Shengyin's hand and bowed to the woman. "Mother, why are you here?" The woman's gaze swept over Gu Shengyin's body. Gu Shengyin only felt her whole body turn cold, as if she was surrounded by ice. "My dear Nicholas, you should have informed me about your wedding." Nicholas's expression remained unchanged. "I thought Mother wasn't interested in this kind of thing." The woman's expression remained indifferent. "You are my favorite child. Naturally, I have to give you my blessings on your wedding day." As she spoke, the scepter in her hand suddenly flashed with silver light, and a dazzling radiance like a star directly descended upon Gu Shengyin. "In the name of the ice goddess, lucky human, I bestow upon you a long life, a face that will never age, and a beautiful love that everyone yearns for." Her voice was ethereal and cold, faintly resounding in the void, but it seemed to resonate with the entire world. This story ended very quickly. In the next world, teachers and students, abstinence. The spoiler ended here. Chapter 1779. Gu Shengyin felt as if an invisible force had entered her body. Her mind jolted, and she couldn't help but close her eyes in comfort. She took a step forward and bowed deeply to the beautiful woman who seemed to be carved out of ice. "Lang She thanks Mother." The beauty nodded coldly and gave Nicholas a look. Her figure flashed again, and she disappeared without a trace. Everyone was dumbstruck. After a long while, Qin Qingqing rubbed her face hard. She didn't care that the makeup she had painstakingly put on was messed up. She said in a daze, "I think I was hallucinating just now." After she said that, Zhang Chao also said, "I think I was hallucinating too." The others said in unison, "We all seem to be hallucinating." 5 pairs of eyes fell on Gu Shengyin in an instant, and their burning gazes seemed to burn through her. Gu Shengyin was speechless. She said in amusement, "None of you were hallucinating. Actually, everyone already knew. How could such a realistic feeling be a hallucination?" Shui Wan said carefully, "So, that person just now," Nicholas said, "that's my mother, Ice Goddess Dorisvina. She controls the cold and ice of this continent." Everyone was speechless. After living for so many years, I just realized that I don't know anything about this world. Ice Goddess? Goddess. So, as the child of the Ice Goddess, Filton was the true son of God? Qin Qingqing felt as if she knew a huge secret. I suddenly feel like this world is a little fantasy, and I seem to know something incredible. I think I might need to wash my face with cold water to calm down, she said incoherently. She wasn't the only one. In fact, the others didn't have much better reactions. Just now, they actually saw a real goddess. Zhang Chao looked at Nicholas with burning eyes. He asked carefully, "Mr. Filton, may I take a picture of you?" He tightened his grip on the camera in his hand. God, this was the descendant of God. He felt that if he could take a picture of him, it would bring him good luck. Nicholas did not refuse. Qin Qingqing was one of the more courageous ones. Although she was very nervous facing Nicholas, she still bravely requested to take a picture with him. Of course, Nicholas would not reject such a small request from his wife's friend. The others also came up one after another, and Han Nicholas took a picture with them. Qin Qingqing held the photo and smiled proudly. Taking a photo with the Son of God, in this world, other than the few of us, who else can do it? After a whole day of excitement, they didn't go back that night. Instead, they stayed in the castle. However, this did not affect Gu Shengyin and Nicholas. As long as Nicholas wanted to, he would not be able to hear anything that others were not supposed to hear. The 2 of them had a romantic and wonderful wedding night. The next day, the 5 of them tactfully excused themselves, leaving time and space for Gu Shengyin and the other newlyweds. Nicholas hugged Gu Shengyin's waist and watched as the cars disappeared from his sight. "It's finally just the 2 of us," he mumbled. Gu Shengyin couldn't help laughing. No matter how arrogant and reserved this man was in front of others, he was always affectionate and clingy in front of her. She couldn't help holding his hand. "From now on, we have enough time to be together. Just the 2 of us. Just you and me." Chapter 1780. As soon as the last world ended, Gu Shengyin couldn't wait to start the next mission. When Gu Shengyin came to this world, she found herself in a quiet classroom. The students beside her were all quiet, and she was lying on the desk. Obviously, the owner of this body was sleeping. The female student in the 4th position on the left of the 5th row, the one in yellow, "Please answer my question." A cold and restrained voice sounded in the quiet classroom. With a whoosh, countless eyes gathered in Gu Shengyin's direction. Gu Shengyin. According to her experience, there was an 80% chance that she was the girl in the 4th position on the left of the 5th row. He looked down and sure enough, she was wearing a light yellow knitted coat today. She subconsciously raised her head and stood up. Gu Shengyin met the eyes of the person on the podium. "Teacher." She opened her mouth and shouted. The man on the podium was expressionless. "Is there a problem? This student?" Gu Shengyin quickly shook her head. She was just using this opportunity to let the system, who had just come to this world, give her a cheat. Then, Gu Shengyin opened her mouth and said a long sentence in a very clear tone. The person on the podium listened very seriously. When Gu Shengyin finished, he waved his hand and told her to sit down. This student just now answered very well. She has her own opinions. Next we. Gu Shengyin quietly let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, system. The host is too polite." begin the transmission of the world's plot. She said. Yes, host. Gu Shengyin slowly looked at the plot of this world. The original Zhang Yu was a second-year student in a university's literature department. She was considered to be an excellent student, with a good family background and a very beautiful face. This girl had a very silly personality. She liked anime, web novels, and 2D novels. She was always half a beat slower when communicating with people, and often made some small jokes. Her friends jokingly called her Zhang Mengmeng. In short, this was a girl with a very likable personality, appearance, and overall very likable. The mission target of this world, Deng Huijun, was considered Zhang Yu's cousin in terms of relationship. Deng Huijun's mother and Zhang Yu's mother were biological sisters. However, the two families never had much contact because Deng Huijun's mother, Zhao Li, was taken by a married man and got pregnant out of wedlock. She fell out with her family and insisted on being with that man. The Zhao family had been a family of scholars since the previous dynasty. They were especially strict with the education of their children. This matter disappointed Zhang Yu's grandmother's family. From then on, they treated it as if they never had this daughter. Deng Huijun's mother, Zhao Li, was also a schemer. After a few years of being a mistress, she finally succeeded in bewitching the man to abandon his wife and son and get married to Zhao Zhao's. Became a legitimates. Thought to be S's BTS not accept her. Who knew that she was completely. The Zhaos were determined not to accept this disgraceful daughter. Her sister, Zhang Yu's mother, Zhao Qing, and Zhang Yu's father were in love. After 2 years of free love, they also got married. The Zhangs were also a real. They were both daughters, and they both married into rich families. However, the treatment they received at home was like heaven and earth. Chapter 1781. Of course, Zhao Li felt unbalanced in her heart. Over time, this kind of imbalance twisted into a kind of resentment towards her family. Not only her father and brothers, but even her sister, Zhao Qing, who was married off, became the target of resentment. Zhao Li originally thought that her life was complete. So what if she was looked down upon as a mistress? In the end, didn't she defeat all those who used to laugh at her and successfully marry into a rich family? However, once she saw her sister, Zhao Qing, Zhao Li's heart felt very uneasy. The Zhang family's family background was not worse than the Deng family's, but Zhang Yu's father, Zhang Qiqing, was much younger and more handsome than her husband, Deng Yuanlin. Moreover, the two of them fell in love freely. The Zhang family also liked Zhao Qing very much as their daughter-in-law. Zhao Li thought that her looks and methods were not inferior to her sister, Zhao Qing. However, she had spent a lot of effort, suffered a lot of disdain before she got what she wanted. However, Zhao Qing easily held it in her hands. She was really unbalanced. Deng Huijun was influenced by her mother since she was young. Naturally, she did not have any good feelings towards the Zhang family. Similarly, she was very disgusted with her aunt, who was the Zhang family's wife. She was 6 years older than Zhang Yu. After she graduated with a master's degree, she chose to teach at a university. It was also by chance that Deng Huijun found out that her cousin, who was born from her aunt, was also admitted to a university. She went back and told her mother, Zhao Li, about this matter. Zhao Li knew about Zhang Yu. She had 3 siblings in her family, her eldest brother, her, and her youngest sister, Zhao Qing. She heard that Zhao Qing's daughter was very doted on at home. In the Zhao family, she was also the apple of her parents' eye. However, her daughter, Deng Huijun, had never even stepped through the door of her grandmother's house. Zhao Li was very unreconciled. She and her daughter, Deng Huijun, discussed for a long time. Deng Huijun came up with a plan. Mom, didn't you say that my grandfather's family pretended to be virtuous, old-fashioned, and inflexible? Think about it. If my obedient and cute cousin became a rebellious girl on the streets who was entangled with a married man, would they still recognize her as their granddaughter? From that day onwards, Deng Huijun began to deliberately approach Zhang Yu. In her opinion, a 20-year-old girl like Zhang Yu would be easily attracted to the outside world. Zhang Yu didn't know this cousin of hers, but under Deng Huijuan's repeated coincidences, the two of them quickly became familiar with each other. Gradually, Deng Huijun began to take Zhang Yu to bars several times unintentionally. She even introduced Zhang Yu to several handsome men. She even understood the appeal of mature and successful men to young girls. Their knowledge and experience were not something that those young boys in school could compare to. However, Zhang Yu was not as easy to deal with as she had imagined. She even seemed to have noticed something and gradually stopped contacting Deng Huijun. Deng Huijun gritted her teeth in anger and cursed Zhang Yu for being cunning and scheming. She thought about it and decided to go all the way. One day, she invited Zhang Yu to a tea house in the name of having a good talk. Zhang Yu thought about it for a long time. Seeing that the tea house was indeed a proper place, he agreed to Deng Huijuan's invitation. However, she had never imagined that Deng Huijun would actually dare to drug her in front of so many people. In a small private room separated by frosted glass, Gu Shengyin just took a sip of tea. She fainted. Deng Huijun took her away and sent her to the person she had bribed with the excuse that her vertigo was acting up. The 7th update. 3 more chapters. See you later. Chapter 1782. Deng Huijuan's motive was very simple. She just wanted to destroy Zhang Yu. Zhang Yu only took a sip of tea and actually woke up in the room. But it was useless even if she woke up. She was alone in the room and the door was locked. The railings outside the French window only reached her waist, but this was the 10th floor. She couldn't even run away. Deng Huijun had spent a lot of money to hire that man. No matter what Gu Shengyin said, he wouldn't give in. He just wanted to finish the job quickly and take the money. Besides, after seeing Zhang Yu's face, he felt that this job was a good one for him. He didn't take Zhang Yu's resistance to heart. Anyway, how many clean women could he find at this age? But Zhang Yu's fierceness was far beyond his expectations. After confirming that she couldn't escape, Gu Shengyin suddenly said that she was willing to cooperate, but she was a little nervous and wanted to drink a glass of water first. It was better for both parties to be willing than to force himself on her. The man also knew that Zhang Yu couldn't run away, so he asked her to stay here and went to the kitchen. Zhang Yu took out the phone with the SIM card removed, recorded an audio, and left the phone on the sofa. Then, when the man came with the water, she jumped down from the railing without hesitation. She fell from the 10th floor. She died on the spot. Gu Shengyin was shocked by this girl's fierceness. Then, she was impressed. She knew that many people in this world had a saying. When you meet a rapist, if you can't resist, then you can enjoy it. But there were always some people who she didn't want to give in to. It wasn't that she had to be a chaste woman, but there were some things that she couldn't stand. Maybe some people would think that this was stupid. But no one could blame this 20-year-old flower-like girl. In the original plot, the police found the phone left on the sofa by Zhang Yu and heard the audio she left. No matter how powerful the Deng family was, Deng Huijun couldn't escape the punishment of the law in the end. But Gu Shengyin still came to this world. Perhaps the laws of the world felt that Zhang Yu's death was too unjust. Her life should not have ended so cruelly at such a young age. Gu Shengyin was still in a daze when she heard her name being called out again. She stood up with a puzzled expression. The man on the podium looked at her confused look. She was like a stupid rabbit that had eaten too much. His heart was pitted for a moment. He said coldly, "Student, please answer my question." Gu Shengyin. Why is it me again? Who the hell knows what you just asked? The almighty system once again played its role. Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief when she saw the satisfied expression on the man's face. She sat down. Her desk mate whispered to her, "Meng Meng, you are really amazing. You can know the answer even when you are in a daze. You are indeed a top student." Gu Shengyin. She suddenly felt a little pain in her face. Then, her desk mate said with some surprise, "But why did Teacher Guan ask you to answer 2 questions today? He doesn't know you, does he?" As she spoke, Her voice became excited. Oh my God, to be remembered by Teacher Guan is really an exciting thing. Gu Xingyin, was it a good thing to be called out by the teacher twice because she was in a daze? Chapter 1783. However, this interlude made her forget about her mission for the time being. She took a good look at Teacher Guan. With one look, she finally understood why this person was so popular. This man was wearing a neat suit on the podium. Every button of his shirt was neatly buttoned, his cuffs were neat, and his hair was combed neatly. From his appearance alone, one could tell that this was a man who was usually very disciplined. A disciplined man was very attractive to the opposite sex, especially when this man had a handsome face that was comparable to a movie star's. He was the teacher of this medical elective course. It was said that his main job was an attending physician in the city's top 3 hospitals. Well, from this, it seemed that this Teacher Guan was flawless in terms of personal qualities. Such a young and handsome teacher with no shortcomings, placed in the middle of a group of boys who often carried a bag of breakfast into the classroom, was the best portrayal of a Prince Charming and a loser. Gu Shengyin searched through Zhang Yu's memory and found out that this teacher was called Guan Hanting. He was privately called the representative of a university's teachers by the girls in the school. He was also known as an abstinent Prince Charming because he did not like to smile and was not humorous like other young teachers. He never interacted or joked with the students. Gu Shengyin also found out a secret. In other words, Zhang Yu had secretly liked Teacher Guan for a long time. However, Teacher Guan obviously did not care about this. He did not even know Zhang Yu's name. There were too many girls in the school who liked him. There were also many female doctors and nurses who liked him in the hospital. However, Guan Hanting did not like any of them. In other words, he had no interest in the affairs between men and women. Gu Shengyin was lost in thought as she looked at this Teacher Guan. In the eyes of others, she was lost in her thoughts as she looked at this handsome man. The deskmate who was talking to her earlier tugged at her again and whispered in her ear, "Meng Meng, control yourself. I know you have a crush on Teacher Guan. Can you not be so obvious? Be careful not to stand up and answer a third question." Gu Shengyin regained her senses and smiled at the girl beside her. "I know, Ruan. Don't worry." The petite and cute girl with long curly hair beside her was called Song Ruan. She was Zhang Yu's classmate in junior high and high school, and they were admitted to a university together. The two of them were best friends who could talk about anything. Fortunately, Guan Hanting didn't ask any more questions until the end of the class, which made all the students in the class feel relieved. Everyone knew that this teacher was cold and merciless. If you didn't know what he was talking about, then you were done for. Be prepared to increase your homework. What? Not doing it? Don't you want your usual attendance scores? Don't blame me if you fail. A university's examinations and exams had always been known to be perverted. These students originally thought that they could finally relax after getting into university, but after getting into university with much difficulty, they realized that it was not easy. Fairy tales are all lies. He still memorized books, took notes, reviewed his notes, and checked his attendance on time. Of course, compared to high school, you have the freedom to choose. Choose to work hard or not. In other words, he had to choose whether to fail or not. The bell rang for the end of class. Guan Hanting decisively shut his mouth and said, "Class is over." Without any hesitation, he walked out of the classroom with his courseware. "He's simply a handsome man," Song Ruan exclaimed as she cupped her face. Gu Shengyin was speechless. Chapter 1784. Apart from this class, there were no other classes in the afternoon. Gu Shengyin packed her things and headed to the dormitory with Song Ruan. Not far from the school building, the two of them were blocked by a boy. Song Ruan instantly understood when she saw his flushed face. She glanced at Gu Shengyin beside her and said decisively, "I'll wait for you over there." Then, she quickly walked to the small pavilion not far away. Gu Shengyin was stunned for a second before she understood the situation. Speaking of which, Zhang Yu was quite popular in a university. It was not uncommon for boys to confess to her on the streets. "Is there anything I can help you with?" she asked politely. The boy seemed a little nervous. After about half a minute of silence, he seemed to have finally gathered his courage and said to Gu Shengyin in a desperate tone, "Senior Zhang Yu, I like you. Please go out with me." Gu Shengyin was speechless. What a straightforward, simple, and violent boy. Judging from his tone, he was a junior. Gu Shengyin did not say anything. After the boy finished his plan, he lowered his head. After waiting for a long time for Gu Shengyin's reply, he looked up at her in confusion. With this look, he met Gu Shengyin's clear eyes. His face, which had finally cooled down a little, turned red again. Gu Shengyin's heart softened when she saw him like this. He was quite an innocent boy. She thought for a moment and said, "I'm very sorry, Junior." Usually, this was a tactful rejection. A trace of disappointment appeared on the boy's face. However, he was more persistent than Gu Shengyin had imagined. "Senior, may I take the liberty to ask you a question? What kind of boys do you like? I can change. I'm willing to become what you like." The moment she heard this, Gu Shengyin's mind flashed with Guan Hanting's expressionless handsome face. Thus she replied, "I like mature men who are self-disciplined, strict, and don't indulge in life and themselves. They are sentimental." Unexpectedly, just as she finished speaking, the junior suddenly said, "So the rumor that you like Teacher Guan is actually true?" Gu Shengyin. What did she just say? All right, she admitted that she had subconsciously made those requests based on Teacher Guan's conditions. But did everyone really know that she liked Guan Hanting? She was in a daze, but the boy thought that she was shy because he had seen through her thoughts. He clenched his fists tightly and said with a firm gaze, "I won't give up. Senior, just you wait. I will work hard to become a man like Teacher Guan." Without giving Gu Shengyin time to react, he turned and strode away. That back view, no matter how one looked at it, revealed an indomitable posture. Gu Shengyin. She really wanted to reach out her hand and ask the boy to stay. "Young man, what are you thinking? Also, don't hang yourself on me. It's impossible between us." She shook her head and looked at the small pavilion not far away. She was about to walk over to look for Song Ruanruan. Then, he heard clear and steady footsteps coming from behind him. Gu Shengyin turned around instinctively and saw a man in a meticulous black suit with a tie neatly tied. His sleeves were tight, and his hairstyle was perfect. Who else could it be other than Guan Hanting, who was dressed so seriously that he looked like he could attend an international conference at any second? However, this was not what stunned Gu Shengyin. It was because she happened to be at a corner. Here was the question. The conversation between her and the boy just now. Did Teacher Guan hear it? 10 p.m. Finally, she finished writing before 12 p.m. Tomorrow, I will continue to update. There are only 2 days left until the end of the month. If you have a monthly vote, please vote for Gigi. Good night. Chapter 1785. Gu Shengyin stood quietly as she watched Guan Hanting walk toward her. "Mr. Guan," she called out softly. Guan Hanting stopped in his tracks. He had been called to the office by a teacher to get some documents after class, so he was a little late. Unexpectedly, as soon as she turned the corner, she heard a sentence related to her. "So, it turns out that the rumors about you liking Teacher Guan are true." It was not that Guan Hanting was narcissistic, but he was the only teacher with the surname Guan in this school. In order not to embarrass the two, he stopped in his tracks. Then, he accidentally overheard the rest of the conversation. Although Guan Hanting did not hear the conversation between the two, he could still easily guess the content of their conversation. He was not surprised by the boy's words. In fact, Guan Hanting had a clear and straightforward understanding of his own charm. He knew that there were many innocent girls in this school who held a trace of pure and beautiful feelings for him. However, he knew that those feelings had nothing to do with love. They just could not tell the difference between a hazy affection for an outstanding member of the opposite sex and true love. They would understand when they matured mentally. The only thing Guan Hanting could do was refuse. He was not in the mood to develop a trendy teacher-student relationship. Although his main job was not as a teacher, as long as he was still a teacher, he could not go against the professional standards he should have as a teacher. For example, he could develop feelings for his students that were beyond a normal teacher-student relationship. When he heard that someone had left, Guan Hanting looked at the time and walked out. Then, he met the girl's clear eyes. So it was her. Guan Hanting still remembered her. She was his student. She had been slacking off in class earlier, but she had been able to answer his difficult question perfectly. He had heard her call him teacher in embarrassment. He thought for a moment and stopped. He nodded slightly at her and said, "Don't you have any classes in the afternoon? The weather forecast said it might rain later. Go back early." He did not mention what he had heard. Gu Shengyin nodded obediently and watched his tall figure slowly disappear into the distance. She walked towards the small pavilion on the other side. Song Ruanruan was playing a simple game on her phone. Seeing her, Song Ruanruan asked casually, "Done?" Gu Shengyin nodded. Song Ruanruan put her phone away decisively and grabbed her hand. "Let's go. Let's go get something to eat first, then." Gu Shengyin smiled as she listened to Song Ruanruan's nagging and followed her to the school gate. Not far away, two women who were dressed more maturely walked out of another teaching building. The woman on the left was tall and beautiful. She had exquisite makeup on her face and was carrying a limited edition bag from a certain brand. "Mr. Deng, what are you looking at?" The female teacher beside him asked. Deng Huijun withdrew her gaze and said with a smile, "It's nothing. I just saw a pretty girl." The teacher looked over and said, "That's Zhang Yu. Do you know him?" "Zhang Yu?" Deng Huijun was surprised. The female teacher asked curiously, "What's wrong? Do you know him?" Deng Huijun smiled and shook her head. "I've only heard of the name." Chapter 1786. She said goodbye to the teacher and looked in the direction where Gu Shengyin and the rest left. She was deep in thought. Back home, Deng Huijun saw her mother, Zhao Li, applying a facial mask. Seeing that her daughter was back, Zhao Li looked at the time and tore off the mask. "No classes today?" Deng Huijun nodded and sat next to Zhao Li. "Mom, I saw Zhang Yu today." Zhao Li, who was massaging her face, raised her eyebrows. "Zhang Yu? You saw her?" Deng Huijun nodded. Her mother had told her about the unfairness of her maternal grandparents since she was young. Deng Huijun had never been to her maternal grandparents' house and had no feelings for the people there. Some time ago, her mother found out that her aunt's daughter, Zhang Yu, was also at a university and asked her to keep an eye on her. It was just that Deng Huijun had been busy with work recently and had not found a chance to interact with her. Zhao Li couldn't care less about her face. She asked, "What does Zhang Yu look like?" Deng Huijun thought for a while and said, "I didn't see her clearly. I only looked at her from afar. She is very beautiful." Zhao Li snorted and said in a strange tone, "Our Zhao family has always been outstanding. My sister has been a beauty since she was young. It would be strange if her daughter was not beautiful." She looked at her daughter's beautiful eyes and felt proud. She said, "But my Huijun is the most beautiful. No matter how beautiful Zhang Yu is, can she compare to my Huijun?" This beautiful and outstanding daughter had always been Zhao Li's pride. Deng Huijun was silent for a while. She did not tell her mother that Zhang Yu was actually very good-looking and was not inferior to her. If she told her mother, she would probably get angry again. It was better not to tell her. At this time, Zhao Li spoke again. "Are you done with your work? Anyway, you are a teacher at a university. You should interact with Zhang Yu during this time. I want to see what kind of outstanding daughter my good sister has raised." Deng Huijun nodded. She was also very curious about the legendary cousin. Looking at the time, she asked, Where is Dad? Not back yet. Hearing her husband's name, Zhao Li's face sank. She said coldly, Go back? I think he has long forgotten about this family. I don't know which vixen's house he's at. Deng Yuanlin was a playboy when he was young. Now that he was older, he didn't restrain himself at all. Zhao Li knew that over the years, the number of women he had outside was in the double digits. As for those who didn't know, it was needless to say. But what could she do? In the beginning, Deng Yuanlin would still apologize to her nicely and buy things to coax her. In the end, he was annoyed and left after saying coldly, Why are you making a fuss? When you were with me, didn't you know that I was such a man? If you don't want to live with me anymore, we'll get a divorce. His heartless words made Zhao Li's heart turn cold. That's right. When I was with Deng Yuanlin, didn't I already know that he liked to steal food? Otherwise, how did she, Zhao Li, manage to squeeze out the first wife and succeed? How could she, Zhao Li, keep the man that other women couldn't? What was even more ironic was that the woman she looked down on had the courage to divorce Deng Yuanlin, but she, Zhao Li, did not even dare to divorce him. Chapter 1787. It was because she couldn't bear to give up the glorious title of Mrs. Deng. It was also because she knew how cold-blooded her husband, Deng Yuanlin, was. If she divorced, she would never be able to get the property that she deserved as Deng Yuanlin's legal wife. Of course, she didn't want a divorce. Even if she was unhappy, at least she could enjoy the envious gazes of countless people when she was outside. Being able to satisfy her vanity outside was enough. Deng Huijun was a little unhappy when she heard her mother's words. She felt that it was very ungraceful of her mother to say such words. Moreover, she had always hated her mother for failing to live up to her expectations. She was her father's legal wife. Why did she allow her father to cheat on her for so many years? Deng Huijun, who had been raised as a princess since she was a child, did not know about her mother's past, glorious deeds. She had always been proud of her identity as the Deng family's princess. She never knew that she was actually just an illegitimate daughter in the first few years of her life. After all, she was her mother. Deng Huijun could only hide this dissatisfaction in her heart. Zhao Li didn't know that her daughter was hiding such dissatisfaction in her heart. Her mind quickly returned to Zhang Yu. She had long been used to her husband's fickleness. Zhang Yu's matter was the most important at the moment. Then it's settled. You go and carefully find out what kind of person Zhang Yu is in private. It's best if she's not very clean. When the time comes, find a way to expose it. I'd like to see how wonderful the expressions on my parents' faces will be when they find out what kind of virtue their favorite granddaughter has. Deng Huijun was also looking forward to it. She had been influenced by what she saw and heard since she was a child. She had always held an unclear resentment towards her aunt and her cousin who was rumored to be very doted on. This time, if she could really get hold of something that could be used against her. Gu Shengyin lay on the bed and listened to the conversation between the mother and daughter with headphones plugged in. What a vulgar and vicious woman. She sighed in her heart and suddenly couldn't help but pity Deng Huijun. It was actually quite a sad thing to be raised by a mother who was full of negative energy and become like this when she grew up. However, this kind of sadness was not a reason to frame others at will. The next day, coincidentally, it was also an elective course related to cold court. The medical courses that Guan Hanting taught at University A were actually very boring. However, due to his good looks and ascetic temperament, this course was one of the most popular electives in the entire school. Of course, 70% of the students in the class were girls. The other 30% were otakus who didn't know anything and just randomly picked a class when they were choosing classes. Every Tuesday and Wednesday, the first class in the afternoon was Guan Hanting's class. Gu Shengyin and Song Ruanruan sat together in the classroom. Today, the two of them came rather late. The consequence of being late was that the seats in the middle of the classroom were all occupied. Only the golden seats, in the first two rows in the middle, were left. This location had always been a black zone that students avoided like the plague. Everyone knew the reason. Song Wanwan was practically wailing as she followed Gu Shengyin to the second row. She even invited someone to a competition. They were going to be screwed this time. Guan Hanting entered the classroom on time as the bell rang. Chapter 1788. As soon as he entered the classroom, he saw the two girls sitting right below the podium. Let's start the roll call. He picked up the roll call list in his hand and said calmly, Zhang Huan. Here. Chan Yuan. Here. Zhang Yu. Guan Hanting heard the girl in front of him open her mouth and answer clearly, Here. So her name is Zhang Yu. Octopus? He circled the name in his mind and laughed inwardly at how interesting the names of her parents were. Next, the class began. Occasionally, Guan Hanting glanced over and could clearly see the girl supporting her chin with her hand. She seemed to be in a daze. He thought to himself that every time he saw her, she seemed to be in a daze. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but think of the conversation he heard yesterday. Did she really like him? Did she like him so much that she would be in a daze when listening to his class? Zhang Yu. Guan Hanting casually asked two questions. After glancing at the roll call list, he subconsciously called out this name. As soon as he said this, he was slightly stunned. Then he saw that the girl was also stunned for a moment. She didn't seem to expect that it would be her turn to answer a question. She blinked her big eyes and stood up. She seemed to be in a daze for a moment. Then, she clearly answered his questions. Guan Hanting was convinced by her ability to answer questions perfectly even when she was in a daze. Okay, sit down. Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief. She was just in a daze a few times out of habit. How could it be so coincidental that she would be called out to every time? She began to sit properly and listen to the class attentively. She seemed to have been marked in this teacher's mind. She had to act quickly to wash away her image in his mind. During the entire class, Gu Shengyin found that Mr. Guan's eyes stopped on her at least 10 times. She thought to herself, that was close. He really did remember me. In fact, Gu Shengyin was overthinking it. Guan Hanting himself was a little puzzled. He didn't know why his eyes couldn't help but fall on the girl below the podium. Then, every time his eyes met hers, a strange sense of satisfaction rose in his heart. He felt that his condition was a little off. The class was finally over. Guan Hanting said, "Class is over." He lowered his head to sort out his materials and prepared to leave. When he turned around, he clearly heard the girl beside Gu Shengyin call her Meng Meng. Meng Meng. Was it a nickname? Guan Hanting muttered in his heart as he glanced at Gu Shengyin's appearance. He had to admit that this name suited her better. Gu Shengyin suddenly received a glance from the podium. She was somewhat baffled. What's wrong? However, Guan Hanting would not answer her. By the time Gu Shengyin regained her senses, Guan Hanting had already left the classroom. I can't play with my phone, stare blankly, or sleep for 2 whole periods. I'm so bored. Song Wanwan was still complaining. Next time we have to come earlier, Gu Shengyin replied absent-mindedly. The two of them walked towards the dormitory. As soon as they walked out of the school building, they saw Guan Hanting standing under a tree not far away. Next to Guan Hanting was a woman in a cream-colored dress. The woman was tall and slender. She was also very beautiful. When she stood next to Guan Hanting, they looked like a perfect match. 4 chapters. The remaining 6 chapters will be updated at night. This month's monthly votes are in the top 3 categories. Love you, love you, love you. Important things need to be said 3 times. See you later. Chapter 1789. Gu Shengyin didn't need to look to know who it was. Meanwhile, Song Wanwan exclaimed softly, "It's Ms. Guan and Ms. Deng." Gu Shengyin turned to look at her. Song Wanwan's voice was filled with excitement, as if she had just heard some juicy gossip. "Meng Meng, you don't know Ms. Deng, right?" She's the goddess in the hearts of countless boys in our school." She listed out everything she knew. "She's the perfect example of a rich and beautiful girl. You know the Deng family, right? Her father is Deng Yuanlin from the Huating Corporation. She's the daughter of a rich family. Most importantly, Ms. Deng is rich and beautiful. I heard that she's quite popular in school. She's in her 20s this year and has always been single. Everyone says that her standards are too high, which is why she hasn't had a boyfriend." As she spoke, she looked at the man chatting with her. Could it be that Ms. Deng has taken a liking to our Ms. Guan? The more she thought about it, the more she felt that the two of them were a perfect match. Only then did Song Ruanruan realize that Zhang Yu had always liked Ms. Guan. She laughed awkwardly and said, "Meng Meng, don't take it to heart. You know how our Ms. Guan is. She's the classic cold-faced killer. Many beauties have thrown themselves at her, but she's been cruelly rejected by him. He might not fall for Ms. Deng, right?" Gu Shengyin listened to her friend's anxious explanation and smiled. "It's okay. I'm not worried at all." Song Ruanruan was stunned. Ha! This reaction wasn't normal. She was Zhang Yu's best friend. She knew very well how much her best friend liked Ms. Guan. Gu Shengyin said confidently, "They won't be together." Song Ruanruan looked at her in confusion. Was Meng Meng that confident? With Ms. Deng's qualities, not many normal men could resist her. Even if they couldn't be together in the end, it wouldn't be a bad idea to fall in love with such a beautiful and elegant woman. Gu Shengyin didn't explain much to her. Deng Huijun did have some feelings for Guan Hanting. She had always been proud and arrogant. For so many years, there had been many men who had pursued her, but none of them had caught her eye. It wasn't that she disliked the other party's family background, but she disliked the other party's appearance. When she met a handsome young master, she felt that the other party had no ability and was just a playboy relying on his family's yumeng. After all, she was quite well-to-do and could afford to waste time. It was fine for her to play for a few more years, so her family was not in a hurry. It wasn't until she met Guan Hanting at a university that Deng Huijun felt the fire in her heart, which had not been ignited for a long time. This man was the kind of man who could attract countless women to throw themselves into his arms just by sitting there motionlessly without even unbuttoning a single button. It was as if there was a kind of magic on his body that tempted others to pounce on him, wanting to pull open his tightly buttoned shirt and see if his heart was as cold and hard as it was on the outside. Deng Huijun was very confident in herself. She had always felt that ordinary women did not have her family background, nor could they compare to her beauty. Even their abilities were not as good as hers. Occasionally, there would be one or two of these, but they would always have their shortcomings. She felt that she could win this man over. Chapter 1790. But when she got close to Guan Hanting, Deng Huijun realized that she was wrong. She thought that this man was like many other men. No matter how serious he looked, he would treat beautiful women differently. But this rule did not apply to Guan Hanting. Deng Huijun could feel that the way this man looked at her was different from other men. There was no surprise in his eyes, nor was he flattered by her taking the initiative to strike up a conversation with him. It was as if in his eyes, such a perfect beauty like her was no different from his group of silly students. Deng Huijun felt helpless. This was the first time she felt defeated by a man. Guan Hanting could roughly sense Deng Huijun's thoughts, but he did not feel anything special about this outstanding female colleague of his. He raised his watch to check the time and nodded at Deng Huijun. "Ms. Deng, I have something to do tonight. If there's nothing important, I'll take my leave." He lifted his leg and was about to walk past Deng Huijun when he suddenly paused. Deng Huijun sensed his movement and looked in the direction he was looking at in confusion. Not far away, two female students were looking in their direction. There were only the two of them nearby. It was obvious that they were looking at her and Guan Hanting. What piqued Deng Huijun's interest was that one of the two female students was her biological cousin, Zhang Yu. But did Mr. Guan know them? Deng Huijun was puzzled for a second before she realized that Guan Hanting had already started walking in the direction of the school's garage. He did not look in the direction of the two female students again. It was as if the pause was just an illusion. Deng Huijun did not take this scene to heart. Perhaps it was just an ordinary coincidence. Let's go back, Gu Shengyin said to Song Ruanruan when she saw the two of them walk away. Song Ruanruan nodded quickly. It was a little awkward to be caught sneaking glances at others while talking to each other. Deng Huijun watched as Gu Shengyin left, and her lips curled into a smile. Zhang Yu? Cousin will be coming to see you soon. Deng Huijun moved quickly. The next day, when Gu Shengyin went to class, she was stopped by someone. Hello, classmate. Gu Shengyin turned around. Deng Huijun looked at her embarrassedly. Excuse me, are you in the Chinese department? I'm a teacher in the foreign languages department. I have a document here that I want to give to Director Xiao of the Chinese department, but unfortunately, I just sprained my ankle. Can you help me deliver it? How could an ordinary student refuse such a request? Gu Shengyin nodded and took the thick document from Deng Huijun's hands. Deng Huijun took the opportunity to take out her business card from her bag and handed it to her. I'm Deng Huijun, a teacher in the foreign language department. Thank you so much. I still don't know your name. Gu Shengyin flashed her perfect eight-tooth smile. My name is Zhang Yu. You're welcome. Zhang Yu's skin was very fair and delicate like porcelain. The most beautiful feature of her face was her eyes. They were very big, and her clear black and white pupils were like two limpid pools. When she smiled, there was a sense of naivety to her. Her nickname, Zhang Meng Meng, was partly due to her naivety. Chapter 1791. While Deng Huijun was secretly pleased with the success of her plan, she was also jealous of Gu Shengyin's appearance. She was already 26 years old, while the little girl in front of her was only 20. However, she had never had such an innocent look, whether it was now, when she was 20 years old, or even when she was younger. Her mother was very strict with her since she was young. Mrs. Deng, Zhao Li, only had one daughter. She felt that her daughter was her pride, and she must do her best in everything. Therefore, Deng Huijun was forced to endure her mother's resentment toward her maternal grandparents and aunt since she was young. She also had to learn various talents and skills. She did not have a so-called childhood, and she did not know how to smile so sweetly and innocently. Because her mother asked her to be a proud lady since she was young. The more outstanding her daughter was, the better she, as a mother, could stand tall in this family. It had to be said that Zhao Li had succeeded. Now, Deng Yuanlin did not have any feelings for his wife, Zhao Li, but he doted on Deng Huijun, the daughter who brought him pride. Occasionally, Deng Huijun looked at the children who acted coquettishly and asked their parents for candy. She felt a trace of envy in her heart. However, this envy turned into jealousy when it came to Gu Shengyin. She heard that her aunt and uncle had a very good relationship, and they were a famous model couple in the circle. They were not like other rich families, where there were all kinds of gossip every 2 to 3 days. Regarding this, Deng Huijun had reservations in her heart. In this upper-class society, she had seen too much ugliness under the glamorous appearance. Who knew if the Zhang family and the Zhang family were indifferent to each other under the beautiful appearance? As for her cousin, Zhang Yu, it was said that she had been pampered by the family since she was young. Deng Huijun used to be indifferent about this, but after seeing Zhang Yu, she believed it in her heart. If Zhang Yu hadn't grown up being spoiled and protected by her family, how could she have raised such a pair of pure eyes like Zhang Yu's? She watched Zhang Yu walk away with the documents, and a trace of disgust flashed in her beautiful eyes. She now understood why her mother hated her aunt so much. Because now, when she looked at Zhang Yu, she also hated her very much. It was the kind of thing that I had to pay a huge price and put in a lot of effort to get, but in her world, it was so easy to get. This kind of disparity could easily make people feel unbalanced. And the result of this imbalance was hatred in his heart. Especially since Deng Huijun did not have a good impression of Zhang Yu. It was very easy to hate someone. Gu Shengyin took the documents and handed them to the grade director. She knew that spraining her ankle and delivering the documents were just excuses. If she guessed correctly, in less than 2 days, Deng Huijun should be contacting her with the fate of thanking her. Her prediction was completely correct. However, she had obviously overestimated Deng Huijun's patience. The next day, she, coincidentally, bumped into Deng Huijun at school. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat when she saw the woman's 13 centimeters high heels. Can't you be more careful when lying? She just sprained her ankle yesterday, and now she's going to continue hating the heavens? Wasn't she afraid of spraining her foot later? Today's 7th update. My body has been hollowed out by my relatives. Really, the 3rd-class handicapped Gao Lengji is writing here with a strong will. 3rd update. See you later. Chapter 1792. When Deng Huijun saw Gu Shengyin, she walked up to her intimately. Zhang Yu, what a coincidence. She greeted her with a smile. Gu Shengyin greeted teacher Deng obediently. Deng Huijun smiled. I'm not that much older than you. Calling me teacher is too distant. If you don't mind, how about you call me sister? Gu Shengyin raised her head and met Deng Huijun's smiling eyes. You want me to call you sister so soon? Gu Shengyin smiled and replied, I wouldn't dare. You know that you're the standard goddess in our school. If I call you sister today, all the boys in the school will send you love letters tomorrow. Deng Huijun's eyes flickered. This girl was smarter than she thought. Song Wanwan, who was standing beside Gu Shengyin, was dumbfounded. Since when did Meng Meng know teacher Deng? And they seemed so close. However, she could not ask this in person. At this moment, Gu Shengyin glanced at Deng Huijun's foot and asked worriedly, Teacher Deng, is your foot better? Deng Huijun's face froze. She had just casually found an excuse yesterday. Today, she wanted to see Zhang Yu, so she was in a hurry to leave and forgot about it. Fortunately, her mind worked quickly. She quickly found an excuse in her mind. I went to the hospital last night and did some special treatment. It's much better now. She reached out her hand and flipped her wavy hair. Her mature and sexy womanly scent greeted him. Song Wanwan was immediately stunned. Deng Huijun smiled satisfactorily and winked at the two of them. Women, what's a little pain in their feet for the sake of looking good? Gu Shengyin widened her eyes, as if she did not understand her words. She said worriedly, Then you have to be careful, Teacher Deng. Don't sprain your foot. It's not a good feeling. Deng Huijun. Can't you say something nice? She cursed in her heart but smiled and said, Thank you for your concern, Zhang Yu. Gu Shengyin said, Well, if there's nothing else, Mr. Deng, we have to go first. I have an appointment with Ruan for dinner. Deng Huijun smiled and looked at the two of them. What a coincidence. I'm also going to eat. Why don't I treat you to lunch as a thank you gift for yesterday? When Song Wanwan heard this, she immediately wanted to express that it was fine for her to eat alone, but Gu Shengyin grabbed her arm. She looked a little embarrassed. But Ruan and I have already agreed to eat hot pot together. Moreover, Teacher Deng, what I did yesterday was what I should do. You don't have to take it too seriously. In other words, she couldn't break her promise. Deng Huijun saw that her classmate was not tactful at all and would not refuse. She could only smile and say, Then I'll treat the two of you together. Gu Shengyin had no reason to refuse anymore, so he could only, reluctantly, agree to her request. When the two of them waited for Deng Huijun to get the car, Song Wanwan asked softly, Meng Meng, when did you get to know Teacher Deng? Gu Shengyin briefly told her what had happened yesterday. Song Wanwan's eyes widened. That Teacher Deng is so gentle. He even specially came to thank you for this. Gu Shengyin smiled non-committally. Maybe. Considering that the two of them still had classes in the afternoon, Deng Huijun brought them to a buffet restaurant not far from the school. Deng Huijun was very depressed. She had wanted to use this opportunity to get along with Zhang Yu and find out more about him. However, with Song Ruanruan standing beside her, she could not say anything. Chapter 1793. In the end, Gu Shengyin and Song Ruanruan had a hearty meal. Deng Huijun was so upset that she wanted to die, but she had no choice but to pay with a smile. "Thank you, Ms. Deng." Gu Shengyin thanked Deng Huijun with a smile. Deng Huijun suppressed her annoyance and said with a smile, "You don't have to thank me." She sent the two of them to the school gate before driving off. "Meng Meng," Song Ruanruan suddenly called out to Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin turned her head and asked, "What's wrong?" Song Ruanruan hesitated for a moment before asking, "Did you really just meet Ms. Deng yesterday?" Gu Shengyin nodded. "We met for the first time yesterday when I delivered something for her." Song Ruanruan looked a little worried. She whispered, "Do you think that Ms. Deng is being too nice to you?" This was a very illogical place. Normally, it was normal for a teacher to ask a student to deliver something for her. Usually, a teacher would just thank the student verbally. This was not a big deal. However, Ms. Deng was being so formal. Not only did she ask the student to call her sister, but she also invited her to a meal. Those who did not know better would think that Gu Shengyin had helped her a lot. Gu Shengyin looked at Song Ruanruan in surprise. She did not expect that her good friend, who usually only cared about eating and drinking, would have such a meticulous side to her. Song Ruanruan saw that Meng Meng was looking at her like that and misunderstood. She quickly said, "Don't take it to heart. Let me tell you, Meng Meng, there are all kinds of people in this society. We can't just look at the surface." Before she could finish, Gu Shengyin grabbed her arm. "I know, housekeeper Ruanruan," she said with a smile. Song Ruanruan was stunned for a moment before she exploded. "Who are you calling housekeeper?" Gu Shengyin laughed. After fooling around for a while, the two of them returned to the dorm. When Song Ruanruan saw that Gu Shengyin was confident in this matter, she did not say anything else. Anyway, regardless of whether that teacher Deng was really passionate or had other motives, Meng Meng would not be at a disadvantage as long as she was on guard against him. The next day, Gu Shengyin heard a piece of news from a male classmate who regarded Deng Huijun as a goddess. It was said that when teacher Deng went home last night, she missed a step. Fortunately, it was not the stairwell. However, she was wearing high heels that were more than 10 centimeters high. It was said that the sprain was not light. She went to the doctor that very night and had to rest for at least a week. Gu Shengyin chuckled when she heard the news. On the first day she came to this world, the skill she drew was rather magical. It was similar to the spirit of speech skill of the gods. However, if this ability was given to the gods, they might be able to create things, and they might be able to kill with a single word. However, in this world, due to the restrictions of the laws, Gu Shengyin's words had a much higher probability of coming true. The smaller the matter, the higher the probability of it happening after she said it. When they met yesterday, she deliberately said those words to Deng Huijun in such a worried manner. "Didn't you lie and say that you sprained your ankle? If I don't really sprain it, how can I live up to your words?" Song Ruanruan even came to gossip with Gu Shengyin. Teacher Deng sprained her ankle the day before yesterday, and she sprained it again yesterday. This time, she probably won't be able to wear high heels for a long time. Chapter 1794. Gu Shengyin did not say anything. She thought to herself, "It's probably been a while since he's in the mood to hit on me." Deng Huijun was lying on the bed. The throbbing pain from her ankle made her anxious and flustered. Her mother was still nagging, "Why did you fall in front of your own house? You're not usually so careless." Deng Huijun was already annoyed, and Zhao Li was still nagging. She said helplessly, "I'm so tired now, Mom. I want to sleep for a while." Zhao Li closed her mouth. She looked at her daughter worriedly and said, "If you have any problems, remember to call me." Deng Huijun nodded and watched Zhao Li walk out of the room. She buried herself in the pillow in annoyance. It was annoying. She always felt that she was unlucky. Deng Huijun had worn high heels for so many years, and nothing like this had ever happened. She could not help but scold herself when she thought of the excuse she had found before. She could find any excuse, but she had to say that she had sprained her ankle. Great, she had really sprained her ankle. The throbbing pain from her ankle made her unable to calm down. She could not help but think of Gu Shengyin again. Zhang Yu was also a jinx. She thought of what she had said yesterday. What did she mean by spraining her ankle again? Deng Huijun felt upset no matter what she thought. So annoying. She pulled the quilt over herself and sulked. Gu Shengyin did not know of her entanglement. However, even if she knew, she would only feel a little better and the sky would be a little bluer. It was Saturday, and there were no classes for the whole day. Gu Shengyin and Song Ruanruan had originally agreed to go hiking in the nearby suburbs. However, Song Ruanruan suddenly said that she had a date. Gu Shengyin, who was forcefully fed a mouthful of dog food, angrily put on beautiful makeup and then ran to the largest theme park in the city center to play alone. Water park? She did not want to play. It would be too troublesome if she got water all over her face. Roller coaster? Gu Shengyin looked at the young people who were vomiting as soon as they came down, and walked away silently. After looking around, Gu Shengyin realized that there was nothing she wanted to do. She strolled around and stopped in front of a machine for holding dolls. Looking at the pile of dolls in the glass container, Gu Shengyin's mood finally improved. "I want 10, she said as if she was talking to herself. She had said this to herself, but she didn't expect the children lining up next to her to hear it. "Big sister, you're exaggerating. I've never seen anyone with 10 dolls. Gu Shengyin subconsciously looked around. On the left, there was a 5 or 6-year-old little boy wearing denim overalls and a round hat on his head. He was looking at him with a serious face. "Handsome, are you talking about me?" The little boy nodded his head very seriously. "Yes, elder sister. Little uncle taught me that people shouldn't casually say things that they can't do. Otherwise, it will be very embarrassing." In fact, the first sentence was said by his little uncle, and the second sentence was made up by the little boy based on his own imagination. Gu Shengyin found it interesting. A 5 or 6-year-old chubby little boy actually knew how to educate people. Which family's adults taught their children like this? She couldn't help but smile and say, "Who said I was bragging? I can hold 10. The little boy's face was full of disbelief. "You're lying. Even my best uncle couldn't catch more than 10 dolls. "Gu Shengyin. What kind of logic was this? Because your little uncle can't hold 10 dolls, so others can't hold 10 dolls? She couldn't help but say, "Who is your little uncle? Is he that good?" At this time, behind the little boy, a man wearing a black casual outfit and a black baseball cap raised his head. "It's me." Chapter 10. This month is over. Please send a wave of votes. The monthly votes in everyone's hands will expire if you don't vote. See you tomorrow. Chapter 1795. When she heard the voice, Gu Shengyin's body stiffened. When she saw the man's face, Gu Shengyin smiled awkwardly. "What a coincidence, Teacher Guan." It was indeed a bit embarrassing to be caught quarreling with someone else's junior on the spot by an elder. The corner of Guan Hanting's mouth raised slightly. "What a coincidence, student Zhang Yu." Gu Shengyin smiled and silently turned around to continue to line up. At this time, the little boy spoke. This time, he looked up and asked Guan Hanting, "Little uncle, do you know that beautiful sister?" Gu Shengyin heard the man's low voice less than a meter away. "Yes, she's little uncle's student." The little boy then said, "Just now, this sister said that she can pick up 10 dolls. I don't believe it at all." Guan Hanting had been standing there, so of course, he also heard this conversation. He glanced sideways at the little girl in front of him, who wished she could shrink her whole body, and a smile flashed in his eyes. Maybe that sister is really amazing. The little boy put on a straight face and seriously expressed his position. "I don't believe it. Little uncle, you're so amazing, but you haven't picked up so many dolls for Zhao Zhao." Gu Shengyin listened to the little boy emphasize this again and again, and her heart was also full of energy. She turned around and looked at the little Shota called Zhao Zhao. With the same serious expression, she said, "I say, little handsome, your parents taught you not to casually say things that you can't do. Then, did they teach you not to casually question other people's words in a situation where you don't have absolute certainty?" These words were obviously somewhat difficult for the little boy to understand. He blinked a little blankly, obviously not knowing how to answer. In the end, the little boy could only look at the little uncle he admired most for help. Guan Hanting was originally standing aside to watch the show. At this moment, he received the little boy's pleading eyes and coughed softly, suppressing the smile on the corner of his mouth. He said, "Zhao Zhao, sister is right. You can't question others casually outside. It's very impolite." Obviously, Guan Hanting had a high position in the little boy's heart. Gu Shengyin looked at Guan Hanting. After saying that sentence, the little boy pursed his lips, obviously feeling a little wronged. However, he still obediently apologized to Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin's heart almost melted when he saw the tears in her big, watery eyes that were on the verge of falling out of her eyes. She quickly half-squatted down and coaxed him in a low voice, "Little handsome, is your name Zhao Zhao? Zhao Zhao, don't cry. Big sister will catch a doll for you to play with later, okay?" However, the little boy was obviously a person with moral integrity. He wouldn't be easily conquered by sugar-coated bullets. He said with a strong backbone, "I have little uncle. Little uncle will give me many dolls." Gu Shengyin raised his head and glanced at Guan Hanting. It was hard to imagine this person standing in front of the claw machine with a serious expression and operating it as if he was studying an academic problem. Imagining that scene, she couldn't help but laugh. At this time, the two girls in front of Gu Shengyin left with depressed faces. Obviously, they didn't get anything. Gu Shengyin winked at the little boy and said, "Take a good look. Am I just boasting? I can definitely catch 10 dolls." She said the last sentence heavily, as if to emphasize something. Chapter 1796. The little boy was still in line, so both of them were looking at Gu Shengyin. Guan Hanting had a hint of interest in his eyes, as if he was watching a good show. The little boy, on the other hand, really opened his big eyes and looked at Gu Shengyin without blinking, as if he really wanted to see if she could pick up 10 dolls. Speaking of which, Gu Shengyin was still a little confident in her heart. After all, picking up dolls wasn't a big deal. Words should be able to work, right? Then, she slowly began to operate the machine. 1, 2, 3. The little boy had already opened his eyes wide. In his eyes, that beautiful sister had simply subverted his understanding. The machine that didn't listen to him every time was operated by that beautiful sister as simple as drinking water. Seeing that the dolls were successfully picked out one by one, the little boy couldn't help but look up at his little uncle. Guan Hanting was also looking at Gu Shengyin. However, unlike his little nephew who was staring at the dolls with shining eyes, his gaze was more focused on the girl who was focused on picking up the dolls. She seemed to be very serious. From Guan Hanting's angle, he could see a very serious side profile. Her long eyelashes were curled up, and her eyes were wide open. She lowered her head with full attention, looking at the claw machine below. Guan Hanting could see her straight little nose and her slightly pursed lips because of nervousness. She really looked like a doll. Guan Hanting was startled by the sudden thought that popped into his mind. At this time, Gu Shengyin happened to turn her head. However, she didn't look at him, but directly lowered her head to look at her little nephew. Guan Hanting looked at her with a smug and playful smile and said, "Little handsome, how is it? Do you want to count how many dolls this sister has picked up in total?" In front of her, there were exactly 10 dolls, no more, no less. Guan Hanting felt the corner of his clothes being pulled. He lowered his head and saw his nephew looking at him with pitiful eyes. The meaning in his eyes was self-evident. Guan Hanting glanced sideways at Gu Shengyin. Her black eyes were sparkling. She was obviously very happy. He curled his lips into a smile. Just as the couple in front of him left, he also walked in front of the machine. He turned to Gu Shengyin and said, "Please help me look after Zhao Zhao." Guan Hanting began to concentrate on operating the machine. Gu Shengyin stood at the side with her arms full of dolls. In front of her was the little boy, Zhao Zhao, who was standing obediently. In front of him was Guan Hanting, who was holding a doll with a serious face. This man was really handsome. As she watched, Gu Shengyin couldn't help but sigh. Perhaps it was because he had come out to have fun, but today, Guan Hanting was dressed very differently from his usual style. He wore a rather casual outfit with a handsome baseball cap on his head. This kind of outfit made him look less strict and distant than usual. He looked much more youthful and approachable. Gu Shengyin dared to guarantee that if Guan Hanting dressed like this in school, his popularity in a university would be even higher. However, his expression was still cold. He was clearly playing such an interesting game, but his expression was as serious as if he was performing a major surgery. Gu Shengyin looked at him expressionlessly, but his hands were very fast and accurate as he picked up the dolls one by one from the machine. 1, 2, 3. When he stopped, Gu Shengyin counted and gloomily found that there were exactly 11 dolls. Chapter 1797. Gu Shengyin. If she didn't know what kind of character Guan Hanting was, she would have thought that he was doing it on purpose. However, the little boy didn't give Gu Shengyin any face at all. He cheered and ran up. After counting them one by one, he proudly showed off to Gu Shengyin. "Sister, my uncle picked up 11. Gu Shengyin. She held the dolls in her hands and smiled as she praised him. This praise came from the bottom of her heart. Everyone knew that this kind of doll picking was really a skill. It was already good enough for an ordinary person to pick up a doll after playing a few times. Gu Shengyin admitted that if she didn't rely on the spirit of speech, it was hard to say if she could successfully pick up one. Guan Hanting, on the other hand, had managed to pick out 11 of them with his own abilities. However, the little boy was in a dilemma after being proud for a while. Children actually liked the fun of playing games. Guan Hanting held the dolls in his hands and said to him seriously, "Since you let your uncle pick up so many dolls, all of them are yours." Gu Shengyin held back her smile and looked at the little boy's confused face. Obviously, he didn't think about how to deal with these things. Some people were already looking over. Gu Shengyin was a girl, so it was fine. However, Guan Hanting was a man, and he was an iceberg cool guy. Yet, he was holding a bunch of colorful dolls in his hands. This contrast attracted the attention of many passers-by. Gu Shengyin even saw a few young girls taking out their phones and secretly taking photos. Guan Hanting just looked at his little nephew seriously. Gu Shengyin knew that this was probably his special way of educating his nephew. He was teaching him how to be responsible for his own actions and how to find a way to solve the problem. Therefore, Gu Shengyin didn't say anything and just stood at the side and watched quietly. The little boy tilted his head and thought for a moment. Then, he suddenly stretched out his hand and took the 2 dolls. He looked at Gu Shengyin and asked, "Sister, do you like dolls very much?" Gu Shengyin instantly understood the little boy's meaning and cleverly avoided this trap. She shook her head and said, "Sister does like dolls, but sister already has a lot of them." She glanced at the man in her arms. Seeing this, the little boy didn't say much and ran to the 2 girls who were taking photos. Gu Shengyin couldn't hear what he was saying, but from the interaction between them, she could tell that the little boy was probably asking the same question as her. She smiled at the 2 girls' surprised smiles, and one of them couldn't help but squat down and kiss Zhao Zhao. Zhao Zhao's face was a little red when he came back. He was obviously shy. He looked at Guan Hanting as if asking for his opinion. Guan Hanting's eyes softened, and a rare smile appeared on his face. Zhao Zhao did a great job. Sharing your things with others not only solves your own problems but also brings happiness to others. The little boy was very happy to be encouraged. There were many children in this amusement park. The last doll that Guan Hanting caught, except for one that Zhao Zhao especially liked, was given away by him. Gu Shengyin sighed with emotion. What a smart child. Guan Hanting's eyes softened. Zhao Zhao is really smart. He glanced at the dolls in Gu Shengyin's arms and suddenly said, Are you going to hold these little things until we go back to school? Gu Shengyin just remembered that she was also holding a doll in her arms. Chapter 1798. She looked at the things in her arms and was a little worried. Gu Shengyin's eyes lit up when she saw Zhao Zhao, who had just returned from delivering the things. She squatted down with difficulty and said to Zhao Zhao, Handsome Zhao Zhao, are you willing to do me a favor? The little boy looked at her in confusion. Gu Shengyin smiled brightly and said, I also want to give these dolls to those who don't have dolls. Zhao Zhao, are you willing to help me? Zhao Zhao tilted his head and asked in confusion, Can't you do it yourself? Gu Shengyin blinked and looked a little wronged. But you're not as cute as Zhao Zhao. If you give them to them, no one will want them. Guan Hanting, who was standing at the side, was speechless. He looked at Gu Shengyin with a blank expression as she coaxed his little nephew. If it were any other day, he might have taken his little nephew and left directly. But today, he didn't know why, but he felt that it was a good thing to watch these two clowns act cute. The little boy was only 5 years old, so he was obviously no match for Gu Shengyin. After being coaxed by Gu Shengyin, he quickly took all the dolls in Gu Shengyin's hands and gave them away one by one. When he came back, his eyes were sparkling, and his face was red and smiling. Gu Shengyin was tempted. She couldn't restrain her inner desire at all. She directly picked up the cute little boy and gave him a kiss. Then, a bright red mark appeared on the left side of Zhao Zhao's fair face. Gu Shengyin chuckled at the sight, but he didn't say it out loud. Zhao Zhao was a little shy. He remembered that his family had taught him not to get too close to strangers. But this sister's body was really fragrant and soft. He didn't want to leave at all. Moreover, this sister and little uncle knew each other. So, it should be okay to hug for a while, right? He carefully turned his head to look at his uncle. Sure enough, his uncle didn't ask him to come down. Gu Shengyin simply felt that children of this age were chubby and felt good to hold. She couldn't help but rub against the little dumpling in her arms. Big sister will treat you to sundaes and popcorn, okay? Zhao Zhao's eyes lit up. This was every child's favorite food. But he still went to check on Guan Hanting first. His obedient look made Gu Shengyin's heart soften. Seeing that Guan Hanting didn't speak, she couldn't help but say, Teacher Guan, it's okay for children to eat a little occasionally. Zhao Zhao is so obedient. Okay, Guan Hanting replied. Ah. Gu Shengyin was stunned for a moment before she realized that the other party had actually agreed. She looked at Guan Hanting in disbelief. He looked like a very strict elder. She thought that she would have to put in a lot of effort. Zhao Zhao cheered in a low voice, and the few of them went straight to the resting area. You guys wait here. Zhongyu, please help me look after Zhao Zhao. I'm going to buy something. Guan Hanting watched the two of them sit down before leaving. Zhao Zhao obviously liked Gu Shengyin very much. Seeing that his uncle had left, he approached Gu Shengyin and whispered, Big sister, little uncle is extra easy to talk to today. Gu Shengyin looked at the lipstick mark on his face and wanted to laugh. Hearing this, she asked cooperatively, Oh? What's wrong? The little boy said with a serious face, Little uncle agreed to whatever I wanted today. If I didn't want it, as long as you asked, little uncle would agree. He looked at Gu Shengyin with a serious face. So, big sister, are you actually dating my little uncle? Ah. Chapter 1799. Gu Shengyin looked at the little boy with a dumbfounded expression. She didn't understand where this conclusion came from. The little boy looked at her and said proudly, Sister, don't pretend anymore. I can see through it. Gu Shengyin. She really didn't know what was going on. The little boy had already explained his analysis. My dad said that no matter how serious and cold a man is, he will become extraordinarily gentle and easy to talk to when facing the woman he likes. Sister, you see, my uncle has never been so easy to talk to. So, it must be because of you. Gu Shengyin. It sounds so reasonable that I have nothing to say. But, she looked at the little boy with a gloomy smile. I say, handsome Zhao Zhao, if your uncle heard what you said. The little boy's body trembled quickly. His uncle's expressionless face flashed in front of his eyes. His uncle wouldn't hit him, but he would coldly look at him until he cried. In the entire Guan family, the one Zhao Zhao was most afraid of wasn't his father or grandfather. It was his uncle, Guan Hanting. He moved a little nervously in Gu Shengyin's direction and whispered, Sister, you're so beautiful. I like you the most. You won't say this to my uncle, right? Gu Shengyin held back her laughter and said with a serious face, Your uncle is my teacher. Students can't lie to their teachers. The little boy gritted his teeth and looked at his favorite monster pillow in his arms. He reluctantly handed it to Gu Shengyin. Then, I'll give this to sister. Gu Shengyin finally couldn't help but laugh. She put the monster pillow back into Zhao Zhao's arms and said with a smile, Sister doesn't want Zhao Zhao's pillow. Zhao Zhao is so cute. Sister won't tell on you. Zhao Zhao's eyes sparkled and his heart finally relaxed. As expected, he really liked this sister. She was pretty and had a good personality. When Guan Hanting came back with a few bags in his hands, he saw two small heads, one big and one small, walking together and whispering something to each other. He couldn't help but laugh. He placed the food on the table, instantly attracting the attention of the two. Delicious food was always the most attractive thing to a foodie. Coincidentally, Zhang Yu was a well-known glutton. And from the looks of it, this little shota named Zhao Zhao was no exception. Looking at the two pairs of eyes staring at him, Guan Hanting suddenly had the illusion that he was raising two nephews. He sighed inwardly and reached out to open all the packaging. In addition to sundaes and popcorn, Guan Hanting also bought a lot of food. Zhao Zhao was a mischievous child. He reached out and picked an apple-flavored sundae and handed it to Guan Hanting. Uncle, have some. Gu Shengyin glanced at him. This brat knows how to present Buddha with borrowed flowers. Guan Hanting looked at the sundae that was handed to him and frowned slightly, but he still reached out to take it. He had never liked these sweet and greasy things. And as a doctor, perhaps because of his profession, he instinctively rejected this kind of raw and cold food. However, he couldn't refuse his little nephew's kindness. Gu Shengyin found it funny. Suddenly, her hand felt cold. It turned out that Zhao Zhao handed over another apple-flavored sundae and winked at her mischievously. Let's eat the couple's sundae, the little shota smiled and mouthed at Gu Shengyin. I really can't do it. I can't write 1,000 words in more than an hour. That's it for today. After 8 o'clock every day, I will take time out to make up for it. Good night, everyone. Chapter 1800. Gu Shengyin glared at the kid, but she still took it. She really liked the sweet and sour taste of green apples. Seeing that both of them were eating happily, Guan Hanting's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but pick up a spoon and put it into his mouth. It tasted pretty good. The combination of a handsome man, a beautiful woman, and a cute little boy had undoubtedly become a big attraction in this resting area. People kept looking over and whispering to each other. At this time, Gu Shengyin's phone rang. She took out her phone and continued to eat while answering the call. Ruan? Yes, not alone. Guan Hanting listened to the girl on the other side of the phone and suddenly looked up in his direction. With someone I know, not a date. Okay, I got it. Go on your date. I'm hanging up. Guan Hanting raised his eyebrows. Date. Gu Shengyin's face turned red. My roommate called. I originally planned to go out with her today, but she ran off on a date. Gu Shengyin was almost done speaking when she realized, why did she have to explain so clearly? Guan Hanting looked at her blushing face and the smile in his eyes became more obvious. I'm not asking about your roommate, I'm talking about you. Ha! Gu Shengyin looked at him in confusion before she understood the meaning in his tone. Zhao Zhao shook his short legs and glanced to the left at Gu Shengyin, then turned to look at his uncle. He deliberately dragged out his childish voice. Date. Gu Shengyin turned to look at Guan Hanting and explained, I was afraid that if I told Ruan that the person in the amusement park with me was Teacher Guan, it would cause some misunderstandings. That's why. Misunderstandings. Guan Hanting looked at her with a faint smile. What kind of misunderstandings would there be if we met at the amusement park? Gu Shengyin had never known that Teacher Guan was such an unforgiving person. Didn't they say that he was quiet and didn't care about anything? Who was this person who was closing in on him? She glanced at Guan Hanting gloomily, puffed up her cheeks, and didn't intend to say anything. What could she say? Many people knew that Zhang Yu liked him, so if they knew that she was with him, there would be all kinds of speculations. Guan Hanting suddenly leaned over. Gu Shengyin widened her eyes. What was going on? The little fellow, Zhao Zhao, also widened his eyes and looked at the two of them with a burning gaze. Then, Guan Hanting gently raised his right hand and touched Gu Shengyin's lips. Gu Shengyin sensed something and gently wiped the corner of her mouth. It was his finger. Her face immediately turned red. Teacher Guan, what are you doing? She stuttered. Guan Hanting glanced at him and calmly retracted his hand. He casually pulled out a tissue and wiped his hand. Your sundae is all over your face. Gu Shengyin didn't know what to say. Zhao Zhao also looked at Gu Shengyin and made a shy face. Sister, you're already an adult. You still get food on your face when you eat. Zhao Zhao won't do that. Gu Shengyin didn't know what to say. She was actually mocked by a 5-year-old little boy. How infuriating. She looked at Guan Hanting, who didn't seem to care, and forced a smile. Haha, thank you so much, Teacher Guan. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.